Welcome to Good Grief Mama. I'm Allie, wife and mom of 3, and this is a podcast for honest conversations about motherhood and marriage, homeschooling, and homemaking. So if you've ever felt called to do motherhood and marriage a little differently, or wondered, why is no one talking about this? Then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you're here. This episode is sponsored by Restore Your Core Physical Therapy. Mamas, whether you're pregnant, postpartum, or your kids are in college, your body deserves some TLC. The doctors at Restore Your Core Physical Therapy get it. From pelvic floor therapy and birth prep to fixing that back pain that you've been ignoring for way too long, they've got you covered. With locations in Carmel, West Carmel, Zionsville, and Greenwood, expert care is close by. Visit restoreyourcorept.com or call 317-597-6323. Mention the Good Grief Mama podcast for $50 off a 90-minute evaluation or $25 off a 60-minute evaluation. You've been taking care of everyone else, and now it's your turn. All right, Good Grief Mama listeners, have you ever had a time where you thought about your spouse and thought, wow, they did not even think about me in that moment, and got a little mad about it? And then later you realized that that wasn't true at all. So let me give you an example to set the stage, because I've never experienced that. But no, recently I sent a text message to Nathan while he was at work, and I asked a question. It was about a schedule kind of a thing. And I couldn't move forward with my planning until I heard back from him about this schedule thing. And he never responded to me. And hours went by, and later he came home from work and I was livid. How dare he ignore me? And literally because I couldn't move forward with what I was trying to do until I heard back from him about his schedule thing. Well, turns out that he had not ignored me. He was actually just trying to figure out his schedule. And then before he could tell me what he was going to do, and he was planning on telling me when he got home, but I spent all day stewing. I was building this small thing into something bigger and bigger and bigger than it really needed to be. A lot of times, for whatever reason, we assume the worst about our spouse. We interpret through our own emotions the situation. Maybe we are tired, or we are overwhelmed, or we are overstimulated. And so we create this whole story in our head, right? Like in my example, I'm sitting here thinking all day, he has a phone that gets text messages and it's on him all the time. Even when he goes to the bathroom, I know he got it. I'm also thinking he has a watch, an Apple Watch on his wrist that also gets text messages. I know he got it. And I'm thinking, he's just chosen to ignore me. And I assume the worst. We also tend to assume the worst based off of past wounds or patterns. And it's well, that one time 2 years ago, he did ignore me. And we start to bring up all of these things in our minds from the past that kind of confirm our worst assumption about them. And it doesn't help when or if we are already kind of feeling unseen or unappreciated in general. Then we start to, again, assume the worst because of that. And very quickly, small things can be turned into really big assumptions. Like in my example, he didn't text me back, which then I took to the assumption of he doesn't care. And then I took that further to the assumption of I'm not a priority. All because my brain and our brain as people, I feel like, we tend to try to fill in gaps. And when we fill in the gaps, we usually fill it in with negative things. And that is not good. So I'm talking about it today because I want us to assume the best about our spouse. I want us to live marriage differently and assume the best about our spouse, not the worst. Because what that does to a marriage, and I'm speaking to myself here, is it not only creates unnecessary distance with your partner because you are putting up this whole story in between you and him, but it turns essentially neutral actions into an offense. Something that is at best or at worst neutral, the not responding. At best, he was actually working on trying to figure it out for me, but it turns it into an offense. He's ignoring me. And it starts to build resentment over time, whether that's quiet resentment because you're not talking about it, or, not quiet resentment. And then it also starts to make your spouse feel misunderstood. or like they're never good enough. Even when they're doing, again, something totally neutral and you're getting mad at them, they're starting to feel like I can never do the right thing here. And they're not always going to be doing the right thing, but they're also not always going to be doing the wrong thing. So when we assume the worst, a lot of times we are responding to a story more than we're responding to reality. So again, this whole mindset shift, the episode title for this is Assume the Best instead of Assume the Worst. I am proposing for myself and for anybody else who wants to live out their marriages differently is to choose to believe that your spouse has good intentions until proven otherwise. This I don't believe is being naive. I think it's just being fair and being like grounded. And I mean, even our legal system has innocent until proven guilty. We should choose to believe that this person we chose to spend our life with has good intentions until we're proven otherwise. For example, we could start to think maybe they're distracted rather than thinking that they're being dismissive. I do this to friends all the time. I will read a text message and then my kids will run in, or I'll be driving. Sorry, I do text and drive sometimes. I'll be driving or something and I'll forget to respond. Or like I'll respond in my head and not actually in the text. Or sometimes I'll type it out, think that I have hit send and it did not send. And so, but when I text them, 2 days later and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I forgot to respond. I thought I responded, blah, 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 but I didn't. I want them to believe me and I want them to assume the best about me in the meantime. You know what I mean? Not thinking, wow, Allie is ignoring me and she's the worst friend ever. I want them to think, wow, she probably just had a child run in with poop in their pants and now she's going to go change the diaper and she forgot. So if I want my friends to do that for me, why would I not do that for my spouse? You know, I should also maybe think maybe they just didn't realize what they were doing rather than thinking that they don't care. So, for instance, we have this big thing about shoes in our house. Nathan has like size 13 feet. So they're just like, I don't even know if it's 13. I forget. It's 12 or 13. But I'm looking at him right now. He has very big shoes and he puts them underneath this bench in our entryway. And we have negotiated about this. They need to be under the bench. That way they're not out and about. If they're not going to be up in the closet or in the shoe cabinet, then they can be under the bench. Anyway, so instead, in the morning, when I trip over his shoes, I could be thinking, okay, maybe he was just in a hurry. Maybe he was distracted. Not, oh, he's sitting here thinking, I'm going to put these shoes right here so that my wife can trip over them in the morning. Assuming that maybe they just didn't realize what they were doing or they were distracted, rather than assuming that they don't care. So, the practical ways that I'm going to try and do this, and I encourage you to join me, is to first pause before reacting. And this is a big thing for me because I react first. So I'm going to try to pause before reacting and think, what else could this mean? What else could it mean that he has not responded to my text for my example at the beginning? What else could that mean? Maybe he did get distracted. Maybe he typed something out and then didn't send it. Maybe he is going to tell me when he gets home. I also am going to be thinking, why would I have done this? Like, if I flip the situation around and it's me, me and him are switched, why would I not have responded or whatever it is? Like I had mentioned with my friends, like there are times when I will read their text, I will fully intend to respond and apparently I just don't. I'm also going to try to ask instead of accuse. So instead of saying things like, why would you do that? Or why are you ignoring me? I'm going to say, what happened here? Or I was a little frustrated and felt dismissed that you didn't respond to me about the scheduling thing, for my example. Can you tell me what happened here? Asking before assuming and accusing, I'm hoping will help. And then lastly, just paying attention to the context and giving grace to your spouse based on what you know their context is. Because maybe they're tired that week. Maybe they're super stressed that week. Maybe they have a really stressful work week and filled with lots of meetings or something like that. That should be factored in because I would want that stuff factored in for me. So I know if I know Nathan has a super stressful week at work, then I'm not going to read into the fact that he doesn't do the dishes when he comes home from work that day, or whatever it may be. I'm going to assume and continue to give grace for the fact that I know work is super stressful for him. So he's probably not going to be operating at 100% right now. Now, I'm not saying to do that, to ignore behavior forever. And it's not even ignoring behavior, it's just giving grace for the context. Kind of like I might want him to give me a little extra grace around that time of the month, or I might want him to give me a little extra grace when I'm postpartum. I want to extend that also and pay attention to the context because I think that does matter. And I also want to pay attention to checking to see a pattern versus a moment. Is this consistent behavior or is this just a one off? And even if it's consistent, like the little shoes over here, have we talked about it in a healthy way? Have I expressed and have they understood how I'm feeling about whatever it is? And have I understood why they were doing that to begin with? It's not ignoring this stuff. You're not ignoring real issues. You're not applying this to like repeated harmful behavior. But it's really about healthy relationships where intent matters. Intent does matter. What is somebody intending to do? It matters. So, what we want to do is assume the best instead of assuming the worst. Now, big picture here, giving the benefit of the doubt to your spouse builds safety in your relationship and it softens your heart towards your spouse rather than this story that you're building up in your head in the meantime. And all these walls, like essentially, I just like visually see like when you're building up this story, you can like see brick by brick, you know what I mean? Like going in, he's ignoring me, he's doing this, he's doing that, blah, blah, blah. He intended to do this. And that's a big wall to overcome after a while. If you continually do that. And it's making it feel like an unsafe place for your spouse too, because it just seems like, okay, you're reading into every single thing I'm doing and I can't win, you know? And so it works both ways in a bad way when you assume the worst. So, what I would like and what I think we should do, because we should be living our marriages differently than the world does, is we want to create a marriage where both people feel like they are for each other, not against each other. Because nobody wants to be with someone who's always assuming the worst about you. I mean, would you want that? Your spouse isn't always going to get it right, but they are also not always going to get it wrong. So, giving your spouse the benefit of the doubt, I think, is the best way to start to make a little bit of change. And I can't emphasize enough the fact that you chose this person. And that always comes back to me. When people are talking about issues that they have or problems that they're having, and like when it usually is leading to assuming the worst, it's like you need to stop and reframe your mind. You chose this person. You knew who they were. I mean, unless they were completely fooling you. You chose this person. You chose this marriage. And love is not a feeling, love is a choice. So when you are with your spouse, this person that you have chosen, choose to assume the best. Choose to love them. And again, it's not ignoring real issues, but you're trying to set a foundation where you can work through issues. And it's going to be really hard to work through issues if you're always assuming the worst about somebody. So this is kind of a short one, but I have a challenge for you this week, and it's going to be for me too. I want you to catch yourself one time when you are assuming the worst and choose a different mental story. Let's say my example happens again. Nathan's a busy man. Say I text him and he doesn't respond right away. Instead of assuming that he's ignoring me, I'm going to choose a different story. I'm going to assume he got busy. He got distracted. And then when he comes home or when he does respond, I'm going to ask him about it and just say, hey, what happened there? I'm not going to say, why didn't you respond? I'm not going to say, why are you ignoring me? I'm going to say, can you explain what happened here? And then I'm going to tell him how I feel about it. If his answer is not, didn't do it for me, I'm going to say, okay, I just want you to know that when you don't respond to me quickly, it makes me feel dismissed. Can we choose something different next time? Very easy, right? So I want you to either do that, catch yourself one time when you assume the worst and choose a different story, or I want you to ask one clarifying question before you make an assumption. So before you jump to, he hates me, he's ignoring me, I'm not a priority, I want you to ask a clarifying question. What happened there? Can you explain this to me? Something like that. We think we can do that? Yeah, maybe, possibly. Well, I want you to let me know. Let me know how the challenge goes this week, or send me a DM, comment on my YouTube, send me a text message through Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and tell me about a time that you assumed the worst and you were completely wrong. Or what is one phrase maybe that's like helps you pause before reacting? Because I might need to hear that because I'm a big reactor. If you're not already, follow me on Instagram, Good Grief Mama Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Check out our website and sign up for my free weekly email newsletters because I send out every Sunday an email that has a marriage question of the week that helps you and your spouse dig a little bit deeper in your relationship, be a little bit more intentional. I send out a mom hack and just all kinds of good stuff in there. So make sure that you are subscribed to our free email weekly newsletter. And all of this information is in our show notes. And I'll see you guys next week.